Here at the Independence Reformed Bible Church, we do allow for questions following the service. Who has the first question this morning?
You spoke about godless conservatism being just as bad as godless liberalism. So we as Christians...
I would argue worse.
Worse. So if we as Christians are living in a world where there is godless conservatism, if we know that a godless conservative has similar goals or perhaps even the same goals as we do, should we yoke or not yoke with that unbeliever in accomplishing goals such as, like for instance, the one that I would obviously mention would be like abolishing abortion. What is our response to a godless conservative who says we have the same goal?
We can work with anyone who's going to work with us. We can't necessarily work with anyone else who's godless. I'll give you, this is a kind of a bad example, but it's one I've used. Let's say along the road I get a flat tire. And I pull over, I start getting my jack, and two people come up to help me. This is kind of a bad illustration, but I think we'll get the point across. Two people come up to help. One's a Christian Scientist, and the other one's a Hindu. Okay? And they want to help me. They want to help me change the tire. Okay? They can help me as long as they do it my way. Get the jack out, start cranking it, get the lug nuts off, pull off the spare tire. We can work together. But if they're going to be consistent with their worldview, we cannot work together at all. Hey, Joel, all the world is an illusion. Just imagine the tire being full and you can drive one out of here. We can't work together now. We can work with anyone else who wants to adopt our worldview of how things should be. We can never adopt theirs because it won't fix anything. If I adopt their worldview in that situation, I'll be sitting there by the side of the road years later, still meditating, still creating reality in my mind. Starving to death, of course, be a skeleton. Won't be able to imagine anything. Who else has a question? Yes?
It seems like short-term memory is a big problem for Israelites, us. We quickly forget what God has done. And I think something I took out of today's sermon is we need to remember regularly what God has done so that we don't forget who He is. I don't know if you want to comment more on that.
Well, in fact, even last week, maybe we commented a little bit about that with some Christian groups that need a miracle a minute. Now, that's probably an overstatement and maybe not fair. I don't want it to be unfair. But the idea that God sent His Son to save me, like that's not enough. I need some other miracle now to convince me that He still loves me. Well, God has said again and again, you tell your children what happened, and you remember what happened, and just move on here. And I think a lot about that whole memory thing, and I wonder if it is memory, yes, but is it just that? Sometimes I would argue, even if we can remember, maybe a difficult financial time, and we get bitter. Well, we can remember the times, if we want to at all, that God has supplied our needs. Year on top of year on top of year. He has been good to us. But at this moment, I just feel like being bitter towards God. And I'm going to do it. And I think it's sort of a combination, if you will. A lack of memory, but also a lack of concentration, lack of thanksgiving, if you will. We sang last week, I know I probably mentioned this too often, but Martin Ricard, his hymn, Now Thank We All Our God. He chose to thank God for his goodness in the midst of that 30 years war. That is the attitude we have to have. Those Israelites should have said, you know what? We're thirsty now. It is true. But we have seen what God has done. We're going to have faith in him, like Habakkuk said later on in Habakkuk's book. He couldn't believe that God was going to take the Chaldeans and punish the Israelites. He couldn't believe it. And he didn't understand it. But he says, is it chapter 3, John, or chapter 2? I think it's chapter 3. He says, you know what? Even if the field doesn't give us any harvest, even if nothing grows, I'm going to believe God. Do you have that, John?
I'm looking it up. In there.
Ian, why don't you read that for us?
I get there.
Find it, John, will you? Thanks, John.
I have a question too.
Okay.
While I'm looking at
While you look up the question.
Exodus in 17, verse 6, he said, behold, I will stand before you there on the rock at Horeb, and you shall strike the rock. I will stand there? God saying to Moses. So, I mean, is he identifying himself as the rock in that verse?
I think he is.
Oh, so you could read it.
Yep.
This is Habakkuk. This is the right attitude. Easy to say.
Back in 3:17, though the fig tree should not blossom, nor the fruit be on the vine, the produce of the olive fail, and the fields yield no fruit, the flock be cut off from the fold, and there shall be no herd in the stalls. Yet I will rejoice in the Lord. I will take joy in the God of my salvation.
Anything less than that is going to get us into trouble. It really is. I think what Habakkuk is doing is he's saying, look, God has supplied our needs before. This is not a problem with God. This is a problem with us.
Just want to talk a little bit more about her question there with, you were saying godless conservatism is worse, but at the same time, if they were willing to do it our way, we could work with them. I was thinking about your flat tire example. What if you have the can fix it flat? It's going to eventually run the tire, but at least you can get to the station. Not really your way, but it's a way of getting it done that isn't the best way, but it might work. Be a workaround. Is there any kind of workarounds we can do, or?
Especially if you're deep in New York City, right?
Yeah,
Where's a fix a flat to get out of here?
Fix it later and keep moving.
Some areas of New York City, yeah. Yeah, good, that's a good question there, and here's how I would explain that. Let's say a guy comes along and says, hey, I want to lower your taxes, I'm going to do it, let's say. Is that not a good thing that happens in the meantime? Well, conservatism as a philosophy, if you will, and I'm recalling, I believe it was, who was the Southern Presbyterian? Oh, I can't remember his name.
D. James Kennedy?
Come on, help me out.
D. James Kennedy?
No. Back before that, during the war between the states. Dabney, thank you, Dabney. Talk about conservatism. He said the problem with it is, it's the shadow that follows the substance. In other words, and we're getting a little bit political here, but we have to do this sometimes. Here's what happens. Let's just say that during Roosevelt's administration, Congress went from Republican to Democratic and stayed that way for years. Now, let's ask this question. Would you rather have that Congress, those Democrats, that were swept into power during Roosevelt, I think around the 40s, someone could help me with the exact date, or would you rather have the Republicans that are supposedly conservative that are running Congress now? Which group would you rather have? My answer is easy. I'd much rather have those Democrats, right? They'd have been horrified at abortion. They'd have been horrified at same-sex marriage. That wouldn't even enter their minds. They've been horrified at the present tax levels. So what conservatism does, it seems to me, godless conservatism, It says, you know what? Those people want to tax you at 90%. Vote for us, we're going to tax you at 70%. And then later on, they're going to tax you 100%, and you vote for us, we're going to tax you at 90%. And what it does, and this is why I said what I said, Ryan. I said what I said because it leaves you with a false sense of security. And the whole time you're still getting closer and closer to the cliff. And you think you're okay because you got conservatives. Now let's go with your illustration about the fix a flat or whatever. The Hindu and the Buddhist, yeah, if another guy comes up and he's, let's say, your basic atheist, professing atheist, I should say, the Hindu and the Buddhist, or the Hindu and the Christian Scientists, if they're consistent, they don't even offer a fix a flat. The fix a flat is still within the Christian worldview. This is reality here. This is material. The fix a flat is going to fix it. Your meditation is not going to fix it. It's still within the Christian worldview, even though it's a different way of getting it done. Does that make sense? Or help?
Yeah, what if it was a true conservative, but like still godless?
What do you mean? What do you mean by
Well,
true?
instead of wanting to lower the taxes to 70 or whatever, want to lower them to 2% or something. Something you would agree with, or flat tax, or who knows what.
So, okay, here's the thing. The true conservatives will let me, I would argue, the true conservatives ultimately going to let me down again. Because the standard is a shifting sand. Why not set up, and as Washington said, he said if we're now I've lost the quote.
But it sounds like against what you just told her. If you're aiming for the same goals, work with them,
Right,
correct?
yeah, they
If
can
you have
work,
a similar goal, why would you not want to work with them at that point?
they can work with us. In other words, as a Christian believer, you can work with me if you want. But a true conservative now, I don't even know if there's anyone that, I mean, I don't even know what one looks like. Your basic true conservative right now is going to be, want to talk about whether or not same-sex marriage is legit. I mean, and right now, I know we're political here, but right now in the Republican group, how many of them have a problem right now publicly now? I get privately when they speak to Christians. Right now, how many of them publicly have a problem with this same-sex marriage thing? How many of them? I don't know of any that's really speaking out about it publicly. I don't know. Maybe some of them are, and I just don't know. You see, it's the question of who's working with them. And you know what? If we lift up a banner of Jesus Christ and His Word, and they want to come over and help us with that, please do. Most of them will be like, you know what? I'd rather be with these communist pagans. Most of your conservatives, I would argue. I hate saying it. But most of your conservatives would say, look, if you're going to talk about Christ, I'm over with the communists. I think a little hard on that, right? And then sorry.
I do have a question about what you were saying about the rock literally following them. In Numbers 17 and
Exodus 17, that's number 20,
and Numbers. I mean, this is kind of minor, but both the rocks mentioned in them are lowercase, and then obviously the one in Corinthians is capitalized. Why did it have to be like the rock literally followed them and not just God was with them, following them, and He used the rocks or a rock that was there? I mean, it makes me think of that article in Faith for All of Life.
Right.
If that is in fact
that is the rock
of
right.
Horeb, it still resides in the land that was Horeb.
Right.
And not in Zin or
Yeah, right.
wherever it was. I mean, unless the
Not
rock
in
moved
caves.
back afterwards.
Right.
Well, why? Well, I just wanted maybe some more clarification on why you think it was a literally following them.
Yeah. What Dan is talking about is this discovery of a rock. It's in Arabia, and to back up a little bit, we have the Sinai Peninsula, And we have a Mount Sinai in the Sinai Peninsula that people go to, and it's a tourist attraction, and it's supposed to be Mount Sinai. Whereas some other people have done a bunch of work and found that Mount Sinai is actually not in the Sinai Peninsula, it's in Arabia, which is very clear what Paul says in Galatians, right? It says Mount Sinai is in Arabia. Found this mountain in Arabia, found this rock 60 feet high that has a split going right down the center of it, and in front of this rock is all this evidence of tremendous water erosion, tremendous, in a land that gets like 2 or 3 inches of rain a year. It's been photographed, documented in Mount Sinai, and it's an amazing discovery. So the question is, why can't it be 2 different rocks? Especially since we apparently have this rock in Mount Sinai or Mount Horeb, which is the same mountain now, if it's in that area.
Right.
So what did God do? Start out at Horeb, go to Kadesh, then for whatever reason it goes back to Horeb.
Right.
And I got no explanation for that other than Paul's statement. The rock followed. That's all I got.
But calling it a spiritual rock, couldn't it be his spirit followed them? I mean, Christ is the rock, no matter if he's an actual being and possessing an actual rock at that time or not.
Trying to get my arms around the question. No, Christ's spirit could inhabit any rock and get water out of any rock.
Right.
Could, except it says the rock followed. And again, that's all I got. I got nothing else.
Okay, all right.
It's a fair question though, because it certainly could be. It's something that I've really never ever wrestled before, ever. I've never wrestled with this one. I came across this one, I'm like, this week, I'm like, okay, rock followed? How is that? How is that? Yes.
I'm going back to politics.
Okay, politics, yeah, you can't ever get away from that.
Ever since Lofton came to Mars, I've been, struggling. So we're gonna work with these conservatives, are we gonna vote for them?
I'm not. I carry a very important piece of equipment every time I go into a voting booth, and I do some writing. And my reason is, and I don't have an ironclad. I have said before, if they're not a believer, I won't vote for them. Yeah. And that's not.
He actually says we're sinning.
Right, he says that. That's not quite as ironclad as what some people like to make it, even when I'd like to make it, to be honest with you, quite frankly. What's my standard for a believer? How do I really know? We have a lot of people who say they're Christians and believe all kinds of things. I've said before that I wouldn't support a Christian group in a political house, like Harrisburg or Washington, unless they actually came out with Christian law. There's Christian law, there's pagan law. It doesn't matter to me if you go to a Bible study. Who knows what you're even studying? So that's not an ironclad thing for me. If I'm convinced a person has Christian convictions, and here's the qualities for me. Fears God, among our own people here, then, 3. Among your brethren, fears God, and here's a biggie. Well, fears God is big, but how do you know he fears God? And I think the third one is the test. Hates covetousness. That's the biggie for me. Why are most people in politics? They love covetousness. They're serious about getting your property and your neighbor's property. They're very serious about that. And they're not leaving office till they get it. Now, I get it that a lot of politicians take a position against taxation or high taxes or whatever. That's what they do. I'm against high taxes. I'm for low taxes or whatever. But I love that word, hates covetousness. See, politicians are used to taking positions, right? I take a position. And they're being packaged by the PR directors. Show me a politician right now who hates covetousness. Hates it. Is at war against it every time he sees it. Or she even. Anyone know one? Anyone be able to identify one right now? Honestly. I'm open. I'd like to vote for somebody. Hates it. That's my test. Get it from Exodus, of course. Yes.
The trick is the way. The way is what we have to look for. Jesus is the way. And if you look at our welfare system, what is the world's way of taking care of the poor? That is to steal money from every one of us, give it to an entity, not a person, an entity, which puts food in their mouth. But what does the Bible say we're supposed to take care of the poor? It's supposed to be through the church, which is a one-on-one thing, and giving individuals to individuals, from our own heart to them, and taking it there like in person. So then you have that one-on-one contact. 1 Corinthians 13 says, and that's the love chapter, but my King James says charity. 1 Corinthians 13:3. And though I bestow all my goods to feed the poor, and though I give my body to be burned, and have not love or charity, it profiteth me nothing. So doing welfare the world's way, where they just take our money and there's no personal love or contact, that is totally wrong. It's profiting nothing. It does nothing for those poor people. It doesn't lift them up. It doesn't encourage them. It puts food in their mouth, but what does that profit them? So the way is the key. The way, Jesus is the way. Doing it Jesus' way is the key. So you're right.
Yeah, there's no way.
You're right.
Well, there's no, we just can't get away from it. It was, there's so much that can be said about that. When I was in the retail food business, managing a small grocery store, that was one of the most difficult moments that I would have, was the public assistance people. The people that were working for a living, they were grateful, they were happy, said nice things. The people in public assistance, completely ungrateful, and the most ungrateful people. That's the way it was. I know I have an attitude about it now, but it was reality. Yes?
I had one question, two actually, but what does it mean to tempt Christ? Are you gonna?
That's next week's. We talked about that a little bit last week, and it's very specifically stated in Exodus. Tempted Christ, tempted God, saying, "Is God among us or not?" And that is a temptation, saying, we're going to talk about this more because there's the word that's used in Hebrew is a used word both for tempting God and God proving us. It's the same word. And what we need to understand is that God proves us. We don't prove Him. And what they were saying was, God, prove yourself to us. And we can't do that. More than next week.
And
I'm going to show you the words next week.
right, getting back to Dan's question, which I talk about that a lot. I get into a lot of discussions about allegories and in the Bible. And to me, it seems that there's not a lot of allegories when it comes to the Old Testament. There's not a lot of, he said this and it really meant, to be honest, I don't really find any really when it says it happened, and I think I take it as a rule of thumb, you know what I mean? Because that's what they use for Genesis. That's how they attack, Genesis. They just want to make it one big allegory and learn lessons from it, rather than, it doesn't have to be literal, just learn a lesson from it. And I think we learn spiritual lessons from the stories, but they are true, actual facts. And that's what just makes the Old Testament so powerful in my mind. It's not, fictional
Myth,
story,
myth,
myths
fiction,
or
sure.
whatever.
Yeah.
So, I don't know, I think
Here,
that helps at all.
Yeah, here's how I would
It's not-
address that. Again, we must constantly look to the Bible to interpret itself. later on we say, for in 6 days the Lord made heaven. In other words, how did they understand it? How did writers under the inspiration of the Holy Spirit understand what was written? We have interpretations of those 6 days, of those 7 days, if you will. We don't have other interpretations, for example, but we do have some others in the Old Testament. For example, okay, I'll give you another example. Joel 2. Shall come to pass in the last days, says God, I'll pour my spirit upon all flesh. Young men shall see visions, old men dream dreams, pour out my spirit. Moon shall be turned to darkness, sun shall be turned to darkness, moon to blood. Blood and fire, vapor, smoke, this kind of thing. Well, what does that mean? That means something, but what? Does it really mean that the moon is going to turn into blood? Interestingly enough, we've had the whole blood moon thing recently, and it turns out that blood isn't blood after all. It just looks like blood, which is very interesting to me, because I've been here all my life, it's blood, and now all of a sudden it's not quite blood. Well, how do we interpret it? Well, then it seems to me we go to Acts 2, where Peter specifically mentions those verses and says, this is what's happening. So that's what drives our interpretation. When we see what the Bible has to say about itself, when it quotes itself. I think that's a decent rule. In the Old Testament, I mean, no one believes, okay, you shall go out with joy and be led forth with peace. The mountains and the hills shall break forth before you into shouts of joy. The mountains and the hills are going to start singing. And we're not done. And the trees of the field shall clap their hands. The trees are going to grow hands and be clapping. No one, I don't think anyone believes in that way. So it seems to me that we're safest when we start with what the Bible actually says about itself. That seems like a good place to start. Good question. Yes?
Ultimately, why was Moses not allowed to go into the promised land?
Excuse me?
Why was Moses not allowed to go into the promised land relative to the rock?
Yeah, because he struck it. He struck it twice.
And so he was asked to speak to it.
Yes, he was told he has to speak to it, and in anger, he gets out in front of everybody. He was told specifically to speak to it. So he gets out in anger and says, you rebels. I believe it's the only time he was just fed up, and he was so fed up with them that he strikes the rock instead of speaking to it. Was he overcome with emotion? You know how it is, especially with us guys, right? When we're emotional, when we're angry, right? Our brain power gets less, and our physical power gets greater, right? And all he could do at that moment was take his rock.
Girls do it too.
Right. Happens with everyone. Yeah. But I don't know if he was overcome that way. The language that he used makes me think that what's going on. And to me, it's very interesting the way it's said, because God says, because you did that, you're not going to the promised land. And the next verses, and then they got up, they went someplace else. It looks like Moses wasn't even that upset about it at the moment. He was later. But it looks like he was like, well, I don't even want to go in the promised land with these people. It doesn't even seem to be a problem at first, which is very interesting to me after all the work that he had done. But it very specifically says, because you did that. You didn't hallow me. You didn't make me. You didn't make me hallowed in the sight of people. You didn't make me special. You didn't separate me. It was about you at that moment. It wasn't about me. And they thought, and he's basically demonstrating to them that he can get that water out of there by hitting it instead of talking, which is God could not put up with that.
Well, he said that.
Yeah.
Shall we
bring forth water from this rock? And then he hits it. All right, we're going to bring the water. Somebody shut up.
So in the Exodus passage, why does it say, I shall stand before you with the rock of Horeb and you shall strike the rock? You know what I mean? He says that, and then he tells him to speak to it in the Numbers passage. So is he just saying, you're going to strike the rock no matter what I'm just prophesying that you're going to strike the rock because I'm going to make you strike the rock? Or is it a command?
Say that again, the beginning.
In the Exodus passage, he said,
Right.
I will stand before you at the rock at Horeb, and you shall strike the rock.
Meaning that
And water will come out of the rock when you strike it.
right, because they were at Horeb first, and then they went to Kadesh.
Right.
Kadesh was Numbers, yeah, so I'm not sure.
Was it 2 separate times they struck a rock or something?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, I didn't get that.
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
yeah, struck it twice. Supposed to strike it the first time, speak to it the second time. He didn't do it.
Gotcha.
Yeah, it seems like such a huge punishment for such a small thing. But at that moment, it was about Moses, and it could never be about Moses. He just never could.
Gotcha, okay.
Thank you for your questions this morning. We've kind of gone a little bit later than we wanted to, but thank you for your attention. And